Hi guys, today I'm gonna do the first part of my January wrap-up. Now this is a little bit late because I was not sure if I'm actually gonna do this two-part thing, but I can now tell that I'm definitely gonna read more than 10 books this month, so I thought I'd do another part 1, part 2 wrap-up. I know a lot of you say that you don't really mind if my wrap-ups are 20 minutes long, but I mind because it's a lot of talking. I sometimes forget my thoughts about, already I'm forgetting my thoughts about the first couple of books that I read this month, and also the editing kills me every time. So I'd rather do 2 parts. So today I'm gonna talk about the first 5 books that I read in January. These are the books that I read exactly up to January 15th. And then next week you will have my part 2. So I started this month a little bit slow because I was still trying to get out of my kind of slump. So I started with a non-fiction audiobook, and that's Get Your Shit Together by Sarah Knight. Now this is a self-help book basically. Yeah, just getting your shit together in life. I gotta say I really enjoyed this overall. Now I listened to the audiobook kind of not focusing on it too much. There's exercises in it that you can do that I did not do. Just kind of wanted to know the basic kind of technique. I can definitely see myself getting a physical copy though and doing some of these exercises. So I definitely think it can be helpful. I do wish that it had focused a little bit more on mental health, especially because the author does mention her kind of past with mental health. But on the other hand, I get it, she's not a therapist. I just feel like especially looking at her kind of personal history would have been nice to have a little bit more of a connection to mental health, but overall I really enjoyed it and gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Now I gotta say, this one, well, first of all, obviously not a enjoyable reading experience because this is about a dystopian world where, you know, most women are basically just baby machines, and it's not very pleasant to listen to. For me, ultimately, the kind of comparison to Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill came up. I think a lot of people say that Only Ever Yours is kind of a copy of The Handmaid's Tale, and while the concepts are very similar, I think that actually Only Ever Yours is scarier. And that is because in The Handmaid's Tale there was this very interesting element of a connection to what is basically today's world. So that means we kind of find out about how everything kind of happened, and we see flashbacks from the main character. And while, as I said, that was a super interesting kind of concept, that also meant that the main character knew a different world, and she knew that everything was happening to her was horrible and wrong. While in Only Ever Yours, this girl that we read about is already a couple of generations into this whole thing. She's perfectly fine with this world. She's playing along, and she has this competition with the other girls. You know what I'm saying? It's just really, for me, more scary to read about someone who has completely adapted to this dystopian world than it is to read about someone who is still kind of being rebellious. I did not give The Handmaid's Tale a rating simply because I rate on an enjoyment scale, and I didn't find this enjoyable. It was a good book, but I do recommend Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill more. Then I listened to Dear A.J. Whaley, or A Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions. I think I got that right. By Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now this is a super short essay about feminist stuff basically. This is another one that I didn't give a rating to because it's so short and it's really just an essay. I don't want to put a star rating on an essay. I honestly found this kind of basic. I think that if you are someone who is interested in feminism, and if you already have some knowledge about feminism, I don't really think that this is teaching you anything new. That didn't make it less powerful for me personally, especially as it's from a point of view of a woman of color, so that obviously always adds a special layer. But still, I think if you're not a white feminist, then most of the things in it you will already know. As I said, still think it's a great read. I think if you can get your hands on a copy or the audiobook, then it's very much worth it. Then I read The Names They Gave Us by MacLeod. This is a YA contemporary about a girl whose mother has cancer, and over the summer she is going to this camp for troubled children, and she's kind of one of the guides, the leading people in that camp. Yeah, there's lots more to it, but that's kind of the very basic premise. I really, really like this book. I definitely wanted some more from it, but I thought overall it was a really great book. I thought that it was able to deal with so many things in such a good way. It deals with kind of friendship and family and romance and kind of finding yourself and faith, which I actually almost think was one of my favorite parts of the story. Like, I'm not like a religious person really, but I could definitely relate to some of the things that were going on in this character's life when it comes to faith, and I really just love the way she was questioning her faith. Thought the romance was really cute and nice and great and realistic. The friendship, yes, so good. So good, so many amazing friendships. Just some of the thoughts the character went through with this, you know, friendship group that has been there for years, and she's all of a sudden like having to get into this friendship group. Really love that as well. The family dynamics were really, really great. I thought there was a little bit much of like dramatic things being unraveled. Like, once there was one thing revealed, you were like, oh, that's the reveal of the book, and then there was another dramatic thing revealed and you were like, okay, this is a little bit much. And overall, I have to say, this definitely does not come close to any of my other favorite contemporaries, especially compared to what I read last year. But overall, really loved this. I thought the tone was really great. I thought everything was very well done, just compared to some other things that I read. Not quite as good. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It's probably more of a 3.75, but it's a really good book that I would really recommend. And finally, in the first half of January, I read The Good Girl by Mary Kubica. Now, this one was a ride, I am telling you. If you plan on picking this book up, please don't go into it expecting a thriller or a mystery, and please don't expect this to be the next Gone Girl, as some people have said. This is a completely different story to Gone Girl, like completely different. It really was kind of a story about it's so hard to say without spoiling it, but basically it's a story about Stockholm Syndrome in a way. There's obviously a couple of things in there, and it definitely sometimes has this kind of thriller aspect to it, and I think I get where people are coming from, but I think you're going into it with completely wrong expectations if you're expecting a thriller or a mystery. That's not what it is at all. Like, it's kind of a romance in a way. Because you're not reading from the perspective of the person who gets kidnapped, but you're reading from the perspective of her mother, the kind of detective, and the guy who kidnapped her, who ends up falling in love with her, and then it's a mutual feeling, and you're like, yeah, okay, Stockholm Syndrome. But then reading from his perspective and reading that he is falling in love with a girl he kidnapped. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's not like a normal kidnap. There's a lot of stuff going on. But still, I find it disgusting to read about a guy who's falling in love with a girl that he kidnapped. That's not what I'm about. That's not what I want to read about, as I don't like it. I also thought that some of the kind of reveals in it were very predictable, and the kind of, let's call it, conclusion was something where I was like, alright, I guess that would happen. I wasn't a fan. I was not a fan. It's honestly not even that interesting, really. Anyway, these were all the books that I read in the first half of January. Let me know how your first few weeks of this new year are going. Are you reading a lot? Are you not reading at all? What's happening? Let me know what's going on. And thank you so much for watching. I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!